So, I popped into High House Insurance to see if they could quote for my house insurance rather than using the internet. High House got a great deal. So to celebrate, I bought a posh hairdo. It made me look beautiful, gorgeous enough to become a highly paid model. I then won Celebrity Big Brother. I had an affair with an MP. Now I'm promoting a doll of me that says, "Cool, blimey, you're well fit."
Happy things happen when you talk face-to-face with High House Insurance. See if we can beat your home insurance quote from the internet. Find us on the High Street, Selsey, or call 606 552.
Hello and a warm welcome to Manhood Internet Radio. I'm Tony Wiener, your host for this show. Now another week gone, the nights are pulling in and it's turning cold, but we have plenty to keep you warm and interested. We will start the show as usual with Alison's roundup of things to do in the area, and that will be followed by the welcome return of David Gaunt, our gardening expert. We then go over to Keith, who has a great recipe for this time of year. For those of you who support education or with children who use buses to get to school, then we have an important interview with Julie Wilk to listen to. Okay then, so we have a lot on and we go over to Alison for a roundup of what's on in the area.
Hello there and welcome once again to our weekly look at what's on in Selsey and the surrounding Manhood Peninsula. First of all, let's take a look at Selsey. On Tuesday the 8th of November, it's time for the mobile soft play session for the under fives. That takes place at the Selsey Centre between 10 o'clock and 11:30. If you and your young ones are interested, then you need to contact Sue or Tom. They're on 604 642. And then later on in the afternoon, also at the Selsey Centre, there's kids kickboxing. That's for 4 to 6 year olds, and that is at 4:30. 6 and over at 5 o'clock, both of those things taking place at the Selsey Centre. Also on Tuesday, the Selsey carers will be having their coffee morning at 10:30. They meet as usual at 109 High Street. And it's also time for the Deaf and Blind UK charity to meet. They meet from 2 until 4 in the afternoon at Hanover Close Lounge. And then also on Tuesday the 8th, the RNA will meet at Selsey Club, Cox's Road. That's at 8 o'clock in the evening. Now, Wednesday the 9th of November, Selsey Model Boat Club will meet at Pond East Beach between 4 and 6. So I think that might be a little bit dark for them, but that's when they're meeting. Later in the evening, Selsey Community Choir will be singing at the Methodist Hall in the High Street, and that's from 7 until 8:30. Also on the 9th, it's the Selsey WI. They're in the afternoon at 2:15 and they're meeting, as usual, in the Town Hall now that the children aren't there anymore. On Thursday the 10th, again it's another mobile soft play session for the under fives, again at the Selsey Centre between 10 and 11:30. And just to remind you about Sue and Tom, they're on 604 642. Later in the evening at the Selsey Centre, it will be adult kickboxing. That's at 8 o'clock in the evening. And then on Thursday again, it's the day for the whist drive. That's at the Selsey Club, Cox's Road at 7:30 in the evening. On Friday the 11th of November, try some mindful music making. That will take place at the shop in Selsey High Street between 2 and 3:30 in the afternoon. If you're interested in trying that out, you need to contact Anna. Her number is 07912 609 437. That's Anna on 07912 609 437. And also Friday, it's time for the Derby and Joan Club. They meet at St Peter's Church Hall between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. On Saturday the 12th, there's some kickboxing at the Selsey Centre for children between 4 and 6 years old. That's at 9:45 in the morning, followed by a family class at 10:30. And in the evening, on the 12th, the Chichester City Band will be having an autumn concert. That's at 7:30 in the evening, and we're promised an evening of musical favourites. So if you're interested in music, Saturday the 12th at the Selsey Centre. Now, during the day on Saturday, of course, the Selsey Venture Bus still run their garage sale. That's between 9 and 12, just past the Co-op. And the Scouts have their charity shop, of course, between 10 and 12 at the Scout Hut on School Lane. So I think that's just about all for the week. Oh, don't forget that on Monday it's Movies for Memories. They're showing Showboat at 1 o'clock at the Town Hall. You get lunch and a film for senior citizens. Booking is essential for that. You will need to ring 201 616, that's 201 616, or you can go to the Selsey Information Exchange for tickets on Penny Lane. And that musical film is going to be sponsored by High House Insurance. So that's it in Selsey. Let's move across now to the Witterings and see what's going on there this week. On Tuesday the 8th, Little Explorers Play and Learn Together will be held at Bracklesham Barn between 9:30 and 11. And it's also time for meet and greet at West Wittering Memorial Hall with coffee, games, homemade soup and a roll. That's between 10:15 in the morning and 1 o'clock. At the barn in the morning, it's yoga with Elaine from 10 until 11. And then in the afternoon at East Wittering's Village Hall, there's a Keep Fit exercise class. They'll be exercising between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. Back to the barn, 4 o'clock, time for Tai Chi. That's at Bracklesham Barn. And then some more singing going on at West Wittering Memorial Hall this time with their community pop choir. That's on Tuesday between 7 and 9. The West Wittering Horticultural Society will be having their talk, Planting for Winter Interest, at 7:30 in the evening in West Wittering Memorial Hall. Also in the evening, the Badminton Club will meet at the barn, 7:30 until 9:30, and there's free pool at Pond Barn. Moving on to Wednesday the 9th, table tennis, drop in and play for adults only at Bracklesham Barn between 10 and 12. And running alongside that at the same time, CBT motorcycle training at the barn between 9 and 11. That will be followed by gyrokensis with Jen. She'll be doing that between 11 and 12. And then at Bracklesham Barn on Wednesday, belly dancing with Step Inside between 1 and 2. Later in the evening, Zumba with Louise between 6:30 and 7:30. And if you would rather some dancing instead, try line dancing at the Royal British Legion. That's from 7 until 9, and all will be made very welcome there. And don't forget it's happy hour at Pond Barn between 5 and 8. Then Thursday the 10th, it's time for Busy Bugs Toddler Gym at the barn, 9:15 until 12:15. Or if sitting down and knitting is more your thing, try Stitch and Yarn at Wittering's Medical Centre. They meet from 10:30 until 12:30. And it will also be time for Knit and Natter at East Wittering Library between 11 and 12:30. Sounds like the times of being quiet at the library are well and truly behind us. It's also the day for the Wittering's Master Art Group between 10 and 12. They meet at West Wittering Memorial Hall. In the afternoon there'll be a Keep Fit class at East Wittering Village Hall between 2 and 3. And at West Wittering, don't forget the short mat bowls. They meet from 10 until 12, and also again at 2. That's at West Wittering Memorial Hall. If you want to find out more about that, you will need to ring Chris. The number for that is 07788 111 325. I'll repeat that, 07788 111 325. Now for the younger members of the community, Junior Youth Club, that's for 8 to 12-year-olds, will meet at the youth centre between 5 and 6:30. They'll be followed by the seniors, that's 12 to 17-year-olds, again at the youth centre, starting at 6:30 and finishing at 8:30. Also on Thursday, it's open mic night at Pond Barn. That will start at 8. On Friday the 11th, short mat bowls at Bracklesham Barn between 2 and 4. And then at the Pond Barn, it's jukebox night from 7 o'clock in the evening until midnight. On Saturday the 12th, how about an early Christmas coffee morning at East Wittering Village Hall between 10 and 12:30, and that's in aid of the St Wilfrid's Hospice. There's also going to be a craft fair at West Wittering Memorial Hall between 10 and 4. On Sunday, as usual, it's Windrush Church who will meet at the barn between 10:30 and 12:45. There's a craft fair at West Wittering Memorial Hall between 10 and 4, and the usual Pond Barn quiz night beginning at 8. Then on Monday the 14th, Little Ducklings Mother and Toddler Group will meet at Bracklesham Barn between 9:30 and 11:30. Don't forget short mat bowls, 10:30 until 1. And then again in the evening, Elaine will be doing yoga at Bracklesham Barn between 7 and 8:30. ARO Ladies Beginner Kickboxing with Verity will also take place at Bracklesham Barn, and that's from 7:30 until 8:30. So that's the roundup of all the different things going on. Let's turn our attention now to the weather, because we all need to know what will be happening in that department. Otherwise we won't have anything to talk about, will we? So Tuesday the 8th, a high of 7 degrees centigrade. In real money, that's 45 degrees Fahrenheit, with sunny intervals, a 10-mile-an-hour wind, west-northwesterly. A touch warmer on Wednesday, 52 degrees Fahrenheit, 11 degrees centigrade. Light clouds, but a much higher wind speed, 18 miles an hour. That again is a northwesterly. Thursday the 10th, 11 degrees, so the temperature is staying fixed at 52 Fahrenheit. Light cloud again, slightly less wind, 15 miles an hour, northwesterly. Friday the 11th, a high of 13 degrees C or 54 degrees Fahrenheit, but that's our day for light rain, and a high wind speed 20 miles an hour, which will be a southwesterly. On Saturday the 12th, 12 degrees centigrade, light cloud, 12 miles an hour wind, and that will be a northwesterly. On Sunday the 13th, slightly lower temperatures, 11 degrees Celsius, 52 degrees Fahrenheit, light cloud again, 12 miles an hour, northwesterly wind. On Monday the 14th, steady on the temperatures, 11 degrees Celsius, 52 degrees Fahrenheit, but today some sunny intervals. Again a wind speed of 12 miles an hour, northwesterly. And for those people interested in walking along the seafront, let's have a look at the tide times. Wednesday the 9th, we can expect a low at 11:45 and a high tide at 6:20 in the evening. Now that, as usual, will change through the week, as you know, ending on Tuesday the 15th with a high tide at 11:30 and a low tide at 5:15 in the afternoon. So that's about it from me for the week. Hope you enjoyed doing some of those activities, and I'll speak to you again next week. Bye for now.
Thank you, Alison. Another great roundup and enough to keep us busy, I think. A change of scene now as we have the welcome return of David Gaunt with his gardening tips.
Hello and welcome again back to Garden News. What I'll do today is garden news for November. What for you to do in your garden in November. November actually is quite a busy month. On the lawn side, it's possible, if it's not too frosty and the surface is fairly firm, to give the lawn a bit just of a high cut for the final time. Seed sowing in November is too late, but it's a good month for laying turf. Keep the leaves off the lawn, and once you've done your final cut, get your mower cleaned and serviced if it's a petrol mower, ready for next season. On the roses side, I generally prune the taller stems of the bush roses, the floribundas and the hybrid teas, down to a reasonable length. Nothing precise, just to cut it back so you don't get any windrock, which we often get in this sort on the Manhood Peninsula at this time of the year. The proper pruning will take place in February and March. The soil's quite warm in November from the summer, and it's quite a good time to plant roses. On the bulb side, you can still plant daffodil bulbs. They'll still grow, they'll still flower next year, albeit a bit later. However, November's a good time to plant tulips. If you plant tulips too early, you'll get tulip fire, and by planting them later, it reduces the problem. As I said earlier, the soil is still warm. It's probably a good time to put some winter bedding in. Pansies, violas, polyanthus and bellis. They'll flower now and continue flowering through the winter in the milder spells and give a good display in the spring. I like cyclamens. However, they're not very frost hardy, but if you plant them in a sheltered position, maybe in a container by the front door or somewhere, they probably will last through the winter. Wallflowers are deliciously fragrant in the spring, and you can probably still get some and get them planted in. They won't grow much more this winter, but you'll still get flowers in April and May of next year. With your containers, if you're not planting your containers with winter bedding, good time to clean them, empty them and get them ready for the spring. If you've got containers outside and you have waterlogging problems, make sure you put them on those little feet just to stop any death during the spring. On the flowers borders, it's a very busy time. As the perennials die back, start cutting them back. the Crocosmia, the Montbretia, the Rudbeckia. Various plants can be cut back now. I generally wouldn't cut back any penstemons now. They're not as hardy as other plants, and it's probably a better idea to leave the stems there and give them the trim back in the spring. On the Crocosmia side, I quite like to leave some of the taller Crocosmia, the lucifers that grow to probably 2 or 3 feet. Actually, I quite like to leave those at the back of the border. They can look quite attractive with the winter frosts, and then I cut them back in the spring. Obviously, it's a good time now to lift and divide herbaceous shrubs. Though all the plants of the geraniums that I've got too big, cut them up, take out the middle bit and replant the outside bits which are fresh growth. You can divide most of the plants in the herbaceous border this time of the year, and hopefully if you've been looking at the border throughout the year, you know which plants which moving and which plants can be put towards the back or even brought forward. On the grasses and bamboos, if you've got some of the deciduous ones, they can be cut back now. But certain plants are like Miscanthus, and I've got some Stipa gigantea, they look very attractive, the seed heads, all through the winter. And I generally keep those back and then cut back in the spring. On the leaf side, make sure you keep all the leaves away from, as I said, the grass and the borders, and especially if you've not netted the pond, keep lifting the leaves out of the pond. Otherwise they'll go off and they'll cause problems to the fish and other animals in the pond during the winter period. Shrubs. Now is a good time to finish off cutting back the buddleia, the cornus and the lavateria. I generally cut it back perhaps by a half now and wait until the spring then to give it a proper big cut. There's plenty of bare-rooted plants available now. They can be planted in. They're generally much cheaper than container-grown plants. And with the soil warm, they'll probably get a bit of growth in and they get the roots established before the colder weather comes. Of the trees and shrubs, it's a good time now to prune and renovate them. Without the leaves on, you can see their shape. So you can cut them into shape and decide how big you want them to be in the spring. But don't cut ornamental cherries, plums or almonds. Cutting this time of the year often leads to problems of silver leaf in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you, David. After a spell in the garden, our grandmas knew what to feed us on to warm us up, and so over to Keith in his kitchen for the answer.
Now this is the time of year this next dish comes into its own, really. Shepherd's pie, and this is Grandma's shepherd's pie, so Grandma knew how to make it. She made it the way she made it and nobody told her she was wrong. So this will serve 4 to 6, depending on how hungry you are. And this is what we need: 2 tablespoonfuls of vegetable oil, 1 large onion chopped, 2 carrots finely chopped, 2 celery sticks finely chopped, 450 grams of minced steak, 1 oxo cube, 2 tablespoonfuls of porridge oats, and 150 ml of hot water. And we also want 700 grams of floury potatoes and butter and milk for the mash, and some salt and pepper to season it with. And this is what we do: heat the oil in a frying pan and fry the onion, carrot and celery until it's softened. Add the minced steak and fry until it's browned. Crumble in the oxo cube and season and continue to fry for about 10 minutes. And stir in the porridge oats and the hot water. Meanwhile, peel the potatoes and cut them into wedges and boil in salted water until they're tender, and mash with plenty of butter, milk and the seasoning. Now preheat the oven to 180 degrees Celsius or gas mark 4. Pile the meat mixture into an oven dish and top with a mash and cook in the oven until bubbling hot and brown on top, about 20 minutes. Now it doesn't come much easier than that for such a tasty dish, does it? Grandma's shepherd's pie.
Thank you, Keith. Now, if you have children who use buses to get to school, then I expect you will know about the great cost increase. Keith has left his kitchen and is talking to Julie Wilkie for the details of the changes and how you can help to find a solution.
Right, with me now I've got a lady called Julie Wilkie, and Julie has written to our MP, Mr. Andrew Tyree, with regard to the removal of the 3-in-1 concessionary travel card for school children. Morning, Julie.
Morning.
Now, if you don't mind, what I'll do is I'll read the letter out,
Okay.
and so that the listeners can go through it with us and pick us up on points if they need to. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about it,
Okay,
because
great.
not having, well, I've got children, but they're far too old. They're nearly old enough for their own bus pass. And we'll come back to ask you some questions afterwards. Right, in October, Julie wrote to Andrew Tyree, and the content of the letter went as follows. Dear Mr. Tyree, as you are aware that since the withdrawal of the 3-in-1 card by Chichester District Council, stagecoach bus fares for many school children in West Sussex have increased by £6 per week. And for a family where I live in Selsey with 2 children travelling to school in Chichester, just 8 miles up the road, that's an annual term time increase of £480, a huge amount for families in a place that has been classed as an area of social deprivation. The government has long advocated that parents should have a choice about the school which their children attend, but families living in Selsey only have a choice of schools if they are able to pay these increased bus fares, so it would seem that choice is not something which extends to low-income families. In a week when the government have pledged to create a meritocracy available to all regardless of income, this lack of choice for low-income families on the Manhood Peninsula seems particularly unjust. For families with children aged 16 to 18 who have to pay full adult fare prices, the increase is even greater at £11 per week or £440 per child per year. As the government has raised the school leaving age to 18 and there is no further education college or sixth form within walking distance of Selsey, parents have no choice at all except to pay this huge increase for 2 years. Again, this is penalising families who already live in an area of social deprivation and, thus, are more likely to be on low incomes. The government has long accepted that free transport must be provided for children aged 5 to 16 who do not live within walking distance of a school, so why does this logic not extend to those that are aged 18? And that is now the school leaving age. At the very least, as those aged 16 to 18 can no longer leave school and enter full-time employment, they should not be expected to pay adult fares on buses. Since the council has withdrawn its support for the 3-in-1 card, which subsidised bus travel for school and college-aged children, Stagecoach have announced that some measures to try and offer a good deal for this age group. This includes the term rider and uni rider bus passes, which can be purchased in advance and which cover the whole term. However, there are a number of problems with these schemes. Firstly, these passes must be purchased in advance, and as they are over £230, this is too great an outlay for many families to find at once, particularly if there are 2 or more children in a family. This means that many low-income families will again be discriminated against, as they will have to continue to buy more expensive weekly tickets. Also, there is the worry of expecting children to look after a piece of paper worth over £230 on a daily basis while at school. Anyone who's seen the size of the average school's lost property pile will know that this is a highly risky request. A Stagecoach will charge a £23 fee for replacing lost passes, and they will only do this once a term. After that, the money is lost. Now, the thought of losing such a valuable piece of paper will make many families unwilling to buy the passes. Many families have also realised that the termly passes are not in fact saving them very much money because Stagecoach have included the school holidays within the dates that are covered by the pass. Although this may seem like a good deal, the reality is that for many low-income families, the school holidays were often a welcome break from having to buy the already expensive weekly tickets, so overall the actual weekly outlay has not been reduced at all. In fact, the uni rider represents a saving of just £1 on the normal adult 13-week pass offered by Stagecoach, hardly a bargain, which means that children still obliged to be in full-time education are being charged almost the same as income-earning adults to use public transport. In addition to these sudden and non-negotiable increases to bus fares which have affected the whole of West Sussex, Selsey families suffer a further injustice. Whereas children living in Chichester or Bognor Regis may purchase a cheaper bus pass, which allows to travel around a restricted zone within those towns, Selsey children must buy a mega autumn gold bus pass, which is twice the price, and which covers nearly the whole of the south of England. Now, most Selsey children just need the bus pass to reach Chichester to go to school, which is 8 miles away. Why on earth are we paying the same price as those travelling all over West Sussex, Hampshire and beyond? I think that families in West Sussex are facing a very sudden and unacceptable price increase in school transport costs as a result of the withdrawal of the 3-in-1 card. Furthermore, I believe that families in more rural communities, such as Selsey, are bearing the worst of these increases, and this seems particularly unfair, as these rural communities are often made up disproportionately of low-income families already struggling with austerity. I think that the government, which advocates choice in education, should put the pressure on the council to restore the subsidies for school transport and ensure that such choice is fairly available to all. Also, I believe that the government should ensure that if the children are now obliged to remain children in an education until the age of 18, then they should be helped with transport costs, whereas not a local education institution for their age group within walking distance, and should certainly not be charged adult fares at all. I would like to finish by saying that I think the government's attitude to rural public transport seems to be that it should be subject, like any commodity, to market forces, when surely it's a vital service for those who are young, disabled, less well off, or who cannot drive for any number of other reasons. And how can Britain become a true meritocracy when so many are discriminated against and prevented from accessing the vital necessity of getting from A to B? Yours sincerely, Julie Wilkie. Well, that's the contents of the letter, and a copy of that will be available to read on the Manhood Radio website, so you can go and look on there, www.manhoodradio.com, and you'll see a copy of the letter and you can read through at your leisure. And now I'm going to take Julie to task with the letter. No, it's not true, Julie. But there are some things that I certainly don't understand, being not being a parent of school children, or school-aged children. Now, firstly, is there not a free bus service from Selsey into Chichester for school children at the moment?
No, there did used to be some years ago, for various reasons. You could get a free bus if you chose a faith school, for example. But I think it's at least 6 years since that was abolished. So gradually all those concessions have been withdrawn. There did used to be, for the very lowest income families, those who qualify for free school meals, did receive free school bus passes. However, when I spoke to Stagecoach, they said that would now only stay in place if you do not have a school within walking distance. So if you're a low-income family and you have got a school within walking distance, then you will no longer get the free bus pass that went with the free school meals.
They've removed the choice.
They have removed the choice
for low-income families.
For extremely low-income families, and there's no free bus for anyone who's above the very low income that qualifies you for free school meals.
Now, I know this is going to put me in bad light with a good many pensioners, but the buses are very busy with pensioners using their free bus passes, and I'm one of those. I do use it occasionally, or quite often actually, and I wouldn't go into Chichester,
right,
if I didn't have a free bus pass by bus, because of the cost.
Right.
Now, I'm, if you like, in the same position as the school children. You can't go, so you have no choice. You have to shop locally then, which is more expensive. So it takes away the choice, which is exactly the point you're making. Now, I did read some figures this morning. I'm not sure of the validity of them, but they were published figures by the council that said of the people eligible, there was an 8-week consultation period, I believe, for this.
Yes, there was.
The bus part, this 3-in-1 card, I believe, is not finishing until 31st of December. There's to be an 8-week consultation period. And the response from people that were affected by it, people that were eligible to vote, for want of a better term, was only 2%. Only 2% of those eligible to make their feelings known actually voted, out of which 96% said they would like it to remain as is.
Well, that's a very good point, and it makes us question what is the definition of a consultation process. If when you consult with over I think it was something like 2,500 people responded, as you say, most of the people consulted, vast majority say we'd like this to happen. If you then go and do the opposite, that's not really a consultation process, in our opinion. Can I just come back to your previous point about the pensioners as well? Because I think the final paragraph of my letter was sort of addressing this overall point of what is a bus service in a rural community. Should it be subject to market forces, i.e. making the bus companies money? Obviously, you can't be naive and say that they're going to run a service if they don't make money. But there has to be, this other argument that, bus services in such circumstances are vital, whether you don't drive because you're older or you're younger or whatever reason you don't drive, they're a vital part of, people getting around and, accessing the local economy and contributing to the local economy. So obviously we, as parents, we've come in on the school run argument because, that's where it's mostly affecting us. But I would also argue, it's not just for the school run. I mean, how many of our young people access the buses because they want to be involved with the arts in Chichester? They want to go to the theatre or they want to go to sporting events. Where I live in Selsey, the Scouts run, Cubs and Scouts and they do a brilliant job, and get lots of the young people involved in Scouts. Obviously, once they get to the age of 14 and they go on to, I think it's Venture Scouts is the final thing. Because Selsey is a smaller community, they can't offer that. So the young people then have to travel into Chichester if they want to continue being in the Scouts. Again, they need a bus pass. So, obviously the school, being able to get to school is one of the most important things. But we're arguing it's a community-wide essential thing, to be able to join in lots of community things that are available to those who live in Chichester.
Yes, I can hear people saying now, well, if you can't afford to live in the country, don't live in the country.
But could you afford to live in Chichester? That's the point, isn't it? For the very people who are living out in the country, generally living out here because house prices are cheaper, etc. So again, it reinforces that point. If you're well off and able to live in the city, ironically, you still have choice and access to all of these different schools,
except for the ones in Selsey.
Except for the ones in Selsey.
You should have to pay to get
but you have that choice. Whereas if you live outside the city, presumably because you're less well off, that choice is taken away from you. And we keep coming back to that fundamental argument. Who is choice for? Is it for, it seems to be with this policy, it's not for those who are less well off, which doesn't seem fair.
No, absolutely. It doesn't. I mean, the only point I would take to task in the context of that letter is where you say that, trusting 16 to 18 year olds with a piece of paper, my thoughts on that are if they can't be trusted to look after their means of travel, then they perhaps shouldn't be allowed out unaccompanied anyway.
I would sympathise with you because my son has actually already managed to lose his bus pass and I've already had to pay the £23 fee. I do question whether he should be allowed out unaccompanied.
Well, at that age, 16 to 18 years old, if they can't take care of what prevents them having to walk from Chichester to Selsey, then I'm afraid they perhaps shouldn't be allowed out of Selsey until they're a little bit older.
That's exactly what I said to my son. But
sure in answer
to
that,
when
he lost his phone and when he loses his gym kit and everything else, because they all do it. But,
the other thing as well, though, ironically, I also have an 11-year-old who I've bought one of these bus passes for, and I don't have any worries about her. She's very sensible and she's managed to look after hers.
Now, let's not make this sexist. Your son can't be trusted, but your daughter can.
No, and my other son as well is fine. But the point is, of course, that, some of the children getting on these buses and using these very expensive bus passes are as young as 11. In some cases, I'm sure some people, even primary school children, are using the buses for various reasons.
I wouldn't expect
it is a bit of a worry handing over these expensive
16
bus
to 18
passes.
Year olds, if they can't be trusted with it, well.
Yeah.
They should get
Quite
it
right.
and ride. And of course, that's another argument that people will say, well, if we had a cycle route that they could ride to Chichester comfortably without danger, then it would make a big difference.
Yes.
So maybe we'll hear something about that a bit later on. But I think it is unfair because it does take away the choice. We don't have a choice of schools in Selsey. So if for some reason you think that the academy is not up to standard, or indeed the academy may not be up to standard. You know, schools do fluctuate in their performance. And
I don't think it's that it's not up to standard. I think people make their choices about what school they're going to, not because one is up to standard and one isn't up to standard, but just because certain schools suit certain people. It might be the subjects they're offering, it might be the sporting activities they're offering. So I think I don't want to suggest that Manhood isn't up to standard at all.
No, I wasn't suggesting that.
Really, I just want to make that point because that's not what we think.
People make a choice because they would be unwise to make a choice if their local school wasn't up to standard. They'd be unwise to pick that as the school to send their children to. Yeah. If they had a choice to send them somewhere else. I've got 2 young grandsons, and one's 14 and one's 10. And so one of those, a 10-year-old, is we're going to have to make a choice on, not me. My daughter's going to have to make a choice very soon as to which school she sends him to. And of course, as you say, some schools are sports orientated, some are arts orientated, some are a good mixture of both. And you know your children, and you would send them, hopefully, to the one that suited them most. So, yes, I fully understand that.
It could also be family circumstances. Some people who live in Chelsea but work in Chichester would like their children to go to a school in Chichester because it might suit what they're doing after school. Yes. There's all sorts of reasons, really. And again, it just keeps coming back to the point of, it's a choice, isn't it? And that's what the government at the moment is very much on about. Families should have a choice for all these different reasons. Yeah. And we shouldn't be denied that choice. Incidentally, I've heard of 2 families, because we're in the autumn term now, where Year 6 children will be choosing which, I think it's by the end of October, that they have to choose where they're going next year. So lots of families I know have been going around the open evenings of all the different schools. And I know of 2 families whose children have been very impressed with one of the high schools in Chichester and would like to apply for it. But the parents are saying, I don't think I can because of the bus fares, So it's definitely something that I've heard local people are taking into account, which isn't right, really. But
it brings me back to the point that I made earlier, that of all those people that were in a position to make their feelings felt, only 2% actually did. So only 2%, you would have to assume, are in a position to complain about it, to moan about it. Only 2% of people are affected by it. Now, I think the figure quoted was 2,700 and some odd people, and only 2% of those actually have contacted the council to make their feelings known. And if that's the case, that's only 40 people out of 2,700, or 40 odd people out of 2,700 odd, that have shown any interest in it, have made their feelings known. So you would say, well, that's only 40 odd people that are affected out of 2,750. Somewhere, of course, you have to draw the line. You couldn't possibly run a bus service for one person to go backwards and forwards.
I see what you're saying. I think you're right in that I do believe it probably does disproportionately affect people in Chelsea, or the whole of the Manhood Peninsula, really. I think the important thing about that is, it affects us disproportionately because we're on a peninsula. Basically, it's almost the geography, isn't it? Before we get anywhere, we have to go to Chichester. And that comes back to this point of, if you live in Chichester, what Stagecoach will offer you is a Chichester-wide tariff, which is about half the price of the tariff that you have to pay in Chelsea to get from Chelsea to Chichester. Similarly, if you live in Bognor Town, there is a tariff just for Bognor Town Centre. Now, the tariff that we're paying allows us to get to Chichester, and it also allows you, as I said in the letter, to, go to Brighton, to go through Hampshire, which is fabulous value for money if you're using all that. The vast majority of school children aren't. They're on the Manhood Peninsula. They're just getting to Chichester and back, or Chichester College and back. So one of the things that we would like to talked to Stagecoach about is the possibility of getting a Manhood-wide tariff, a peninsula-wide tariff, if you like. So could we not have a similar thing that they have in Chichester, where we could use the buses just on the Manhood Peninsula and the surrounding Chichester area, for a much reduced fee? Because we don't really need to go to Brighton and Portsmouth and all the rest of it.
Do you not think your argument might be that the Bognor one is contained within Bognor? It doesn't include travel into Chichester. So, if you like, the Manhood Peninsula one would perhaps go as far as Huntston and no further.
Well, we think to go as far as Chichester, which is generally speaking, it's 8 miles from Selsey. I don't think it's much further than that from the Witterings. I don't think asking a tariff to cover 8 miles is a huge ask, really. You can't actually get a bus from Selsey to anywhere else on the Manhood Peninsula. You can't get a bus from Selsey to East Wittering. You can't get a bus from Selsey to Bognor. Similarly, for people who live in East Wittering and West Wittering, they can only get a bus up to Chichester. So you know, it is literally 8 miles up the road. If you lived in Bognor Town Centre or Chichester Town Centre, how many buses are there available for you within that tariff? You know, there's quite a few routes which cover quite a few miles, certainly more than 8. So I don't think we're being unfair or unrealistic asking for
It's
that.
the first time I've heard mention of a peninsula rate, or peninsula tariff, and it sounds to me like a perfectly reasonable request. Now, have we had any reply from Andrew Tyree?
I haven't as yet had a reply from Andrew Tyree. We have had reply. We have approached Selsey Town Council, who've been very positive, and offered to support and help us. One of the things we were having trouble with is getting hold of Stagecoach and arranging meetings. So I understand that some of the councillors on Selsey Town Council have taken that up with us, for us, and they are approaching Stagecoach with a view to getting a meeting together. And if that happens, which I hope it does, certainly the peninsula-wide tariff is one of our main suggestions that we'd be putting forward to them. So we're just at the stage now where we have to wait and see if that comes off and how they react to it, really.
I mean, I noticed that there's a £2 night rider fare available now. Now, if they can do that for £2 anywhere from 7 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night or whatever times they're in, surely they could reduce the fares during the day. You know, I understand what Stagecoach are doing, and I fully appreciate it, because if the youth of Selsey want to get into Chichester, especially for the arts of cinema or stuff like that, it's usually in the evening, not during the course of the day, and it makes it very possible for them to do it. And £2 is more than reasonable to get to Chichester and back in the evening. But I'm sure that I have my own feelings about the bus service in Selsey. I think it's fantastic.
Right,
It's tremendous. But it could be used slightly better, by which I mean the amount of times during the course of a day that you see buses running backwards and forwards every 15 minutes with nobody on them.
That's a really good point, actually. And I think I would agree with you that the bus service is fantastic. You know, it goes, you know, directly through Siddlesham, Huntston. You know, it accesses quite a few little villages on the way. It gets you into Chichester relatively quickly, and you're not waiting too long at the stops. So I do agree in principle. You know, it's a very good bus service. I don't personally know how economical, and I don't know how the bus companies work out how often to run their buses, etc. But I agree with you that there must be room for negotiation. Again, do we need 4 buses an hour during the day? Perhaps if we cut it down to 3, would that save money there? Which maybe would help to fund other things that we want. Yes.
That certain times of the day, it costs exactly the same to run a bus at 11 o'clock in the morning as it does at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes.
Because the fuel cost is the same, the driver's wages are the same, etc., etc. But sometimes during the day, we'll have buses going out of Selsey with 2 and 3 people on them. Now, surely Stagecoach could look at that.
Yes.
And I know that's going to fall foul with some people, but surely Stagecoach could look at that and maybe drop 4 services during the course of a day to counteract the cost of getting the kids to school, as it were.
That's a really good point, and I think that's something else that we want to try and raise if and when we get this meeting with Stagecoach. And that's actually something as well that came up in the town council meeting that some of the councillors suggested. And that's why we are really grateful that Selsey Town Council have kind of got behind us and supported us, because of course I don't see the buses during the day because of course I'm at work all day, so I don't know if they're going empty or whatever.
I'm one of those old fossils that have the ability to wander around all day doing nothing.
So I think that,
because I'm retired.
This is a good result of the fact that all people are, getting behind this campaign and, bringing all their ideas and,
we
experience to it.
Everything has a cost. But, surely there must be a way of working this out so that it suits pretty much everybody.
Yes.
And I think really that only needs people to sit round a table and talk and say, well, if we did this, then that would enable us to do that. And because
I think you're right.
Selsey Town Council have now gotten behind you, there's just a chance that they may come up with that plan, and of course they do have a little bit more weight than an individual.
Yes.
When it comes to speaking to people like Stagecoach,
yes,
or even Andrew Tyree. Well, thanks for coming in and talking to us, Julie.
Thank you.
It's very, very difficult to get to the bottom of a situation like this in one meeting, so I'm sure we'll get you back in the not too distant future and get us updated on how it's going.
I'd definitely like to do
that. I'm not certain, so perhaps you can tell me, has the consultation period, as it were, finished now, or is it?
Well, yes, the consultation period finished. It has to be said as well, it was held sort of largely over the summer holidays, which wasn't a great time for parents and families with school-aged children to get involved. But it's finished, and West Sussex County Council have withdrawn the 3-in-1 card, which is expiring at the end of December. So those of you who had a card that's already expired, those families are already paying the increased costs, and everyone will be paying the increased cost from January next year. So we've talked a lot about Stagecoach. One of the things we're very disappointed in as well is that West Sussex County Council have made it very clear that they will not negotiate on the loss of the 3-in-1 card. So as far as they're concerned, they are not going to subsidise the buses for school children in any way. Again, Selsey Town Council, we are trying to negotiate on our behalf, but as voters, as members of the public, we are particularly disappointed with that stance from West Sussex County Council. I think they have ignored the people in more rural areas, and as if we don't count as much as the people who live in the cities.
From the figures that I managed to read this morning, I think the cost of it to West Sussex County Council is 1.2 million.
Right.
In the whole scheme of the county's accountancy, as it were, 1.2 million doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount. Now, they fund lots of projects across the county throughout the year, and maybe some of those shouldn't receive so much funding against something as important as this.
Well, obviously, I don't want to advocate reducing funding from anyone else, but again, it just brings me back to this point of who is bearing the brunt of the cost. And there's an argument, isn't there, in national government as well over the last few years, which people are bearing the brunt of the cost of austerity? Because at the end of the day, this is another austerity measure. And I would argue, in the microcosm of this local issue, it's not the potentially wealthier people living in the cities who are bearing the brunt of this particular loss of £1.2 million. Yet again, it's the people living out in the rural areas likely to be on lower incomes, and the people who are on lower incomes not having that access to choice. So yet again, the brunt of these austerity measures, I believe, is being borne by those less able to.
I mean, the only question I would ask is that, if these people that are on low incomes are that interested in it, why didn't they make their feelings known? if only 2% of the 2,740 or whatever it was that were eligible, only 2% of those could be bothered to actually make their feelings known.
Well,
that seems to me that there's not many of them that are really bothered by it.
I don't think that's true, actually, because one, how do we know that the 2% weren't the 2% who are being most affected? Because most definitely, the vast majority, as we've already said, who answered the process voted not to have the 3-in-1 card removed. So there's that argument. Perhaps all the people.
Well, 96% of those that actually bothered to take part in the survey.
Yeah.
Said they wanted it left alone.
They wanted it left alone.
I can understand.
So
that's only 96% of 2%.
Yes, but what I'm saying is maybe the 2% in the first place were the people most affected. So I don't think it's fair to say the people it's most affected have not bothered to do anything about it. For all we know, they were the 2%. I think there's many other arguments as well. There are lots of varied arguments why maybe those who are most affected by these measures feel that they don't have a voice to, on a very simple level, if you're on a very low income, you may have lots of other things going on in your life that prevent you from having the time. You might be working very hard, or you might, you might not have the time to answer this consultation. You might not have been made aware that, that it was happening.
You may not have computers to enable you to.
Yes,
to
you
get
may,
online
for
to
various
take part.
reasons,
there
you
are,
might
there are a
have
number
had
of
access.
reasons, certainly.
But my other answer to that is that we've set up a Facebook group for people who are affected by this issue, and we have over 90 people on this Facebook group, all expressing the same opinions, all supporting us. When it comes down to going on a radio interview or meeting with Chelsea Town Council, out of those 90 people, there are perhaps a handful of people who would be willing to do that. And of course, again, that's for a number of different reasons. People don't have time. People with busy families, they're working, they don't have time. People may not feel confident. Some people may not feel,
90 people have got time to go on Facebook.
They've got the time to go on Facebook.
So if that's the case, they've also got the wherewithal to get on the council website.
Facebook is a much more informal media, as we all know. For me to come on the radio today, it's quite nervous. I'm nervous.
So am I.
But as part of my job, I'm very often talking to people. So, I know that I could hopefully come on and not do too bad a job. Other people just may not have that confidence.
Yes.
I think there's lots of different reasons why people don't get involved. And there's probably a debate for another day. Why do people not get as involved in public life as others do? But most definitely, the feeling is there. And I think it's up to those of us who have got time and resources to get involved to stand up for the people who can't.
Well, good on you. That's what I say.
Thank you.
Well, as I say, thanks for coming in and updating us to where we are at the moment. I'm sure that you'll let us know if there's any
Yes, definitely.
changes, and if you do, we can let the people out there know what's going on. We'd be more than happy to do that. And it's been a bit of an eye-opener for me because, as I say, not having school-age children, you tend not to worry about things that affect school-age children. So it has been an eye-opener.
Thank you.
And thanks once again, and do keep in touch.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to put our case forward.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and we hope West Sussex County Council and Stagecoach will help find a solution. This issue is also featured on our Manhood Internet Radio Facebook page. So with that, we've come to the end of the show, so it just remains for me to thank all our contributors, including Local Life magazine, our sound editor John Mallett, our presenters Alison, David and Keith, not forgetting, of course, our producer John Fletcher. So it's goodbye from me, Tony Weiner. Until next time, bye.